Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold. As always, I'm joined by Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report. Pitchers and catchers reported last Wednesday. The first full squad workout happened Sunday, and now we are counting down the days until the first spring training game, Saturday, February 21st against the New York Yankees at George M. Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. The sun is shining. The temperature is warm. Baseball is back. Spring training is underway. That is the vibe here in Lakeland, Florida. But enough of that. Let's get into the big news of the past week. It happened last Tuesday. The Tigers signed franchise icon Justin Verlander to a 1-year, $13 million contract, with the right-hander returning to the Tigers for the first time in 8+ years. He spent his first 13 seasons with the Tigers from his MLB debut in July 2005 until the Tigers traded him to the Houston Astros in August 2017. And now JV is back as he continues his quest for 2 goals, pitching until age 45 and becoming the 25th pitcher in MLB history to reach 300 wins. We're going to get into all of the information underneath the hood, but on the surface level, what do you think about the return of Justin Verlander?
Yeah, I try not to be a fan too much anymore, if that makes sense. Like, I'm a fan of the game, but I try to be objective and analytical and not get my emotions involved. But this is one of those things where it's like, how can you not be romantic about baseball? Tarik Skubal is an amazing pitcher, back-to-back Cy Young winner. One of the best pitchers I'll ever see in my life play for Detroit. But Justin Verlander is the best pitcher I'll ever see pitch for the Tigers. And it just feels right to have him back in Detroit. This is why, like, 99% of rom-coms, the couple gets together and then they break up and then they get back together at the end and you feel good because it feels right. And that's the way this feels. I will say it's kind of a bummer that it comes at Reese Olson's expense. You always hate when pitchers get hurt, and this is a pretty nasty one. Shoulders are scary, and Olson is young, and you hope he can come back and pitch well, but there are no guarantees there. So that part is unfortunate, but the Verlander stuff is like I said, it feels right.
Justin Verlander, Reese Olson, very clearly tied together here in this situation. Now, I mentioned age 45 and 300 wins. Justin Verlander, he turns 43 years old in a few days, so he is getting close to 45. That's been his goal since he made his MLB debut, was to pitch until he's 45 years old. And then he needs 34 more wins to reach the 300 milestone. So that's like 12 wins per year over 3 seasons. Doing that would get him to age 45 and 300 wins. But you want to know why the Justin Verlander signing happened? It wasn't just for nostalgia. It's because the Tigers finally needed Justin Verlander. And I want to make this clear. Justin Verlander picked up the phone after his 2025 season with the San Francisco Giants ended, and he called owner Christopher Ilitch, president of baseball operations Scott Harris, and manager AJ Hinch. And he said he wanted to pitch for the Tigers in 2026. And basically the Tigers, and this is according to JV's recollection, it was Scott Harris, told him, thanks, but no thanks. That was at the beginning of the offseason. And even as the offseason went along, there was practically no chance of a reunion between the Tigers and Justin Verlander because the Tigers weren't interested, just like they hadn't been interested in Verlander's previous 2 trips through free agency. And then something happened in early February, and it pretty much forced the Tigers to be interested in Verlander. That's when Reese Olson underwent right shoulder surgery, or more specifically, a right shoulder labral repair surgery. Just like that, he's going to be out for the entire 2026 season. And to be clear, Olson underwent surgery February 2nd, and the Tigers signed Framber Valdez on February 4th, and then the Tigers signed Justin Verlander on February 10th. But the Tigers found out about the severity of Olson's injury about a week before signing Valdez. So sometime in the last week of January. So once the Olson surgery happens, which is a huge loss, the Tigers engaged in negotiations with Justin Verlander and ultimately signed him to a 1-year, $13 million contract. It's a $2 million base salary for 2026, and then the other $11 million is deferred with payments beginning in 2030. So for you, knowing how all this went down, what's your reaction to the Reese Olson signing? And are you happy the Tigers pivoted to Justin Verlander? Or do you wish the Tigers would have signed a Chris Bassett, Nick Martinez, or even a Lucas Giolito, even though all 3 of them would be more expensive than Verlander's $2 million base salary here in 2026?
like I said, the Olson stuff is a real bummer. And I understand why they, heading into the season wouldn't have pursued Verlander necessarily, because they felt like Olson could be a part of the rotation and they felt like they had a solid rotation. And then, the Valdez stuff happens and then there's no room. And then, now there's room for Verlander. I really liked Chris Bassett, but that was partially because I didn't think the Tigers were going to spend on Framber Valdez, right? Like I thought that of the mid-tier pitchers, he was a really interesting one. And Verlander is a fun idea, but I didn't think that they would bring him back because there wasn't room. And I thought that they were going to kind of avoid these older pitchers after the Alex Cobb didn't work out last year and Kenta Maeda didn't work out the 2 years before that. But everything just kind of aligned. And I think to your point, like Verlander is actually a good pitcher still, and he can help them and they need him. So it really worked out. And you're not going to get a better deal than what he gave them. Really, like you got to give Justin Verlander a ton of credit. Now, he doesn't need any money. He's one of the most well-paid baseball players of all time. But still, to take $2 million in salary this year and, defer the other is a pretty remarkable thing. And it shows how much he wants to be in Detroit.
He also talked about not wanting to be a mercenary, like jumping around different teams. He didn't want to go sign with the Baltimore Orioles or whatever it may be. Like he wanted to sign with the Detroit Tigers or the Houston Astros. Those are the two teams that he wanted to sign with. And I feel like based on hearing him talk about his current situation, until he hangs up the hat and calls it a career, it's going to be Tigers or Astros the rest of the way. That's just how he seems like he wants to go about doing it. Now we'll see if those opportunities present themselves, but that's where he wants to be. He wants to be in Detroit or he wants to be in Houston. As for me, I love the Justin Verlander signing because I'm a sucker for nostalgia and because he's hungry to win the World Series with the Tigers in 2026, which he failed to do in 2006 and 2012. And he regrets losing the World Series in both of those opportunities. It's the same reason why I loved Backyard Baseball when it came out on the App Store, because I used to play that game all the time as a kid on the computer. And now here I am as an adult and I got it on my phone. But aside from that, the Justin Verlander signing, it just makes sense because like you said, the Tigers also signed Framber Valdez, like Tarik Skubal, Framber Valdez, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Justin Verlander. That could be an elite rotation even without Reese Olson. But I would not be saying the same if it was Tarik Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, Lucas Giolito, and Justin Verlander. Like I would not be comfortable with that. That would not hit the same as a Tarik Skubal, Framber Valdez led rotation. So I think I'm more comfortable with Justin Verlander because I know the Tigers have the best 1-2 punch in baseball in Skubal and Valdez. And then as for Verlander, yeah, we'll see what the performance is like in 2026. I think he still can be an effective pitcher. You go back to 2025 and you look at what he did. It was a 3.85 ERA with an 8% walk rate and a 21% strikeout rate across 152 innings in 29 starts, but it was a tale of two halves of the season. He had a 4.99 ERA in his first 16 starts and then a 2.60 ERA in his final 13 starts. He was average in walk rate and strikeout rate, as well as average in fastball velocity at 94 miles an hour and whiff rate at about 25%. It's pretty much a 5-pitch mix, 4-seam fastball, slider, curveball, changeup, sweeper. And then his fastball maxed out at 98.3 miles an hour last season. So there does seem to be something left in the tank for Justin Verlander, but we're about to find out just how much is left in the tank. Fangraphs projects Verlander for a 4.31 ERA across 141 innings in 26 starts in 2026. If that happens, 4.31 ERA, 141 innings, 26 starts. Would you be satisfied with his season or would you be left wanting more?
No, I think that would be fine. That's a good season these days, right? Like these aren't, it's not 2006 where you expect guys to go 190 innings to 240 innings or whatever. And for, if you treat Verlander like your fifth starter, that's really not bad at all. That would be the fourth most innings in the Tigers last year. It's a little more iffy if he's your third starter, but I don't think anybody's really expecting that. And you can look at it like this. Last year, there were 82 pitchers in the majors through 140 plus innings. That 4.31 ERA would have ranked 58th. So, in the bottom half, but not near the bottom, and it was right behind Sonny Gray, who's making $31 million this year, and ahead of pitchers like Flaherty and Zach Gallen and Dylan Cease. So it's still solid production, and it wouldn't shock me at all if Verlander exceeded those innings and had a lower ERA, but it seems like a fair estimate because given his age, and the number of injuries he's dealt with in recent years, it seems like a solid middle ground. But like I said, it wouldn't shock me if he repeats last year's numbers, which were pretty darn good.
All right, let's get into the big two. Question one of the big two. What have been the biggest takeaways after 1 week of spring training? I'll get started by going right to the big five, as it was described by someone in Tiger Town. That's Tarik Skubal, Framber Valdez, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Justin Verlander. We're calling them the big five. And it's not just the potential for a dominant rotation, but it's their support of each other that caught my attention at the beginning of camp. We had a press conference Wednesday for Framber Valdez and a press conference Thursday for Justin Verlander. And just a few minutes before the Valdez press conference started, guess who walked in the back of the room to show their support? It was the other four starters, Tarik Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Justin Verlander. And look, we know there's been controversy around Framber Valdez after the cross-up with his catcher last season. So I think for all of those guys to show up to support him, I really respect that. I think it sends a message that the Tigers are welcoming Framber with open arms, and the Tigers aren't going to turn their backs on their teammates. Like, that's a great message to send. And then for Verlander's press conference, same way. The other four starters showed up to support him. And I'll quote Verlander, who said it's early when asked about if there's like this camaraderie amongst the five starters. But he also said that this is a good starting point to what could be a very strong bond. And then Verlander also said, and I'll quote him here, quote, "It definitely has the opportunity to be one of the better staffs that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of some really good ones," end quote. So all of that got my attention on the early days of camp. What did you think about the Framber Valdez press conference, the Justin Verlander press conference, and the fact that we have a big five here in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, those are the two big sort of drivers of this strange but understandable sort of 180 in fan mood that you've seen over the last 3 weeks. Like, it was always confusing to me why fans just seem to be really upset after 2 playoff seasons and a good young team. And I guess I shouldn't say confusing, but it just felt odd because, I know that people wanted big signings and they want, stars, and they wanted Alex Bregman and stuff like that. But then suddenly, you get one of the best pitchers on the market and you bring back a franchise icon. And now it just feels like optimism is flowing like crazy. It's maybe a part of that is just spring being spring, but yeah, that big five right there is the main reason. Like, it's, they added 2, 3, 4 wins just by getting Valdez there. And, losing Olson, as we said, is a bummer, but Verlander's a solid replacement. So yeah, there's a lot of optimism going on right now.
And then once the dust settles after the Framber Valdez and Justin Verlander press conferences, we finally get pretty locked into like everything else going on around camp. And you have Jace Young playing first base now. You have Kevin McGonigle getting infield reps with Javier Baez, Colt Keith, Gleyber Torres, Zach McKinstry, and Spencer Torkelson on the first day of full squad workouts. You have Colt Keith playing only third base and first base in spring training, dropping second base, which is Gleyber Torres. It's his everyday position. And we know Spencer Torkelson is locked in as the first baseman. So if Colt Keith is only playing third base and first base, that means the path is wide open for Colt Keith to take over as the everyday third baseman. And then you have Javier Baez still roaming around in center field. And I think we're going to see him all over the place, especially once Kevin McGonigle arrives at shortstop.
Yeah, it's a lot of the fun stuff of early spring is these, position battles, but also just the position sort of versatility. Guys trying new things or, focusing on a new spot. The Jace Young at first base thing was kind of interesting to me. He's got to try to find a spot somehow. But we're getting, profiles. You've written a bunch of profiles on these relievers. The Tigers brought in hundreds of relievers. And they all have interesting stories, but there's so many of them that they can get kind of lost in the sauce. And then there's also, we're getting the best shape in their life stories. Like the early leader is Tyrone Lorenzo, but somebody's going to take that throne soon.
Hey, he's down by 35 pounds. I don't think you're going to be able to beat that. Although I heard Colt Keith was down like 7 pounds, so maybe he was trying for it, but Lorenzo surprised everyone.
Yeah, but you never know. Like it's spring. All weight gain is good and all weight loss is good. Like, hey, he's coming in stronger.
That's not even counting all the conversations with the players in the clubhouse. Like you have Tarik Skubal, who is hungry to win a World Series in his final season with the Tigers. He is pumped up to have a childhood hero in Justin Verlander as his teammate. And he is absolutely fired up about winning his arbitration hearing, making $32 million instead of $19 million. Got Riley Greene. He's made a couple of small, unnoticeable mechanical tweaks, but the main focus to stop striking out so much is refining his approach. He called it more of a mental thing than anything. He talked about feeling like he could hit anything for a home run last season, and that's what led to so many strikeouts because he was trying to hit everything for a homer, and we all know that's not conducive to consistent, steady, sustainable success. Here's a quote that stood out to me. This is from Riley Greene. Quote, "If I have 2 strikes with a runner on second, maybe try not to hit a 5,000-foot home run." end quote. Now I worry about that because it's like really, really hard to create new habits and stick to them. Like it's easy for me to say I'm going to journal every day or I'm going to run a mile every day or whatever it might be. Like it's easy to say something, but it's much harder to do that every single day. So I think Riley Greene is going to be tested during the season. Like what happens when Colt Keith leads off with a single and Gleyber Torres hits a single and now you have runners on the corners, no outs for Riley Greene. And he feels like, man, this pitcher just gave up 2 hits in a row. I can crush this for a home run. Is he going to swing out of his shoes or is he going to be patient in waiting for his pitch to take that big swing while also staying ready to put the ball in play and just drive in the runner, even if it's a sacrifice fly? Again, like his ability to stick to his approach will be tested and he won't be perfect, but he needs to do a better job of not trying to hit everything for a home run. I think his personal evaluation, like looking inward, is spot on. That's a good first step. Now I look forward to seeing how he follows through on this plan. And you even got Spencer Torkelson. He's talked a lot about trying to light a fire inside himself every day in this year's spring training. If you remember last year, he had external motivation because he wasn't guaranteed a spot on the roster. The Tigers went out and signed Gleyber Torres to play second base. And right when they signed him, they said, Colt Keith is our first baseman. And what did that mean for Spencer Torkelson? It meant that his roster spot was not guaranteed. And he thrived off of that in spring training. But this year, Spencer Torkelson is guaranteed a roster spot. So he admits it. He's not as motivated externally, which means he needs to find a way to motivate himself. And he's found that by asking himself this question. Here's the quote. Quote, how good can I be? That's the motivation. It's not, can I stick? No, how good can I be? End quote. If you remember 2024 spring training, when Torkelson was coming off his first 31 homer season in 2023, he was a little bit too comfortable. And then he really struggled in 2024. And well, now that he hit 31 home runs again in 2025, he doesn't want to get too comfortable here in 2026 spring training. So that's why he's trying to light a fire inside himself. He also worked out at Club Nemesis in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is owned by almost Detroit Tigers third baseman Alex Bregman, who played for the Red Sox in 2025 and is now with the Cubs in 2026. So Torkelson went from working out on his own at Arizona State to working out with Alex Bregman's crew. Like I think that type of offseason environment should only help him in 2026. So, and we'll see how things play out for him when the games start. That's a lot of information, but those guys are 3 really big pieces to the Tigers in 2026, Tarik Skubal, Riley Greene, and Spencer Torkelson, and all 3 of them had a lot to say as spring training got underway. All right, let's get into question 2 of the big 2. What's our read on the Kevin McGonigle situation? Because the Tigers had a chance to slam the door shut on Kevin McGonigle making the 2026 opening day roster, but both AJ Hinch and Scott Harris, they haven't done that. They could have slammed that door shut on the first day of pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training, but they danced around the idea that, yeah, the odds are in McGonigle's favor, but they also weren't willing to close the door on him. And I want to know what you're thinking at this point in time.
I'm still projecting him to start the year in Erie now, possibly Toledo, but just going through the minor league rosters, it's kind of tough to find a spot for him. But I think the Tigers are doing the right thing here. I think this is a tremendously talented kid who's going to be a big part of the franchise relatively soon. And so they should give him a shot to go out and win the job. And he has the talent to do it. There's just, there's always things to learn. And going from 46 games in AA to the big leagues is just a massive leap in difficulty and challenge. But I do think now is a good time to kind of throw absolutely everything at him and see what happens. You test him out in spring. And so I'm kind of curious to see what curveballs Hinch is going to give him, to see his reaction. Hinch likes to do that sometimes, use him as a pinch hitter late in the game or, pull him early in the game for somebody else to face the lefty, see how he reacts, stuff like that. But ultimately, I think it's all going to come down to his defense at shortstop. And it's hard for me to picture him being a better option on defense than Baez and McKinstry. They should give him every rep that they can. And you never know, maybe a couple injuries at shortstop and suddenly McGonigle is your best option and he's coming north. So yeah, don't close the door just yet because he's close.
I want to go back to spring training in 2023 when Colt Keith was the hottest position playing prospect in the Tigers organization. And although he hadn't played above high A West Michigan, he did rake in the Arizona Fall League in 2022, just like Kevin McGonigle did in 2025. And the Tigers told Colt Keith in his player meeting, it was February 24th, 2023 that he wouldn't make the opening day roster. So the Tigers shut that down pretty much right away in 2023 spring training. As for Kevin McGonigle here in 2026 spring training, yeah, the big difference is he has played in Double-A Erie. But the point here is that the Tigers hadn't shut it down, which leads me to believe that there is a realistic chance, even though the Tigers also haven't said there's a realistic chance. What we know here is that McGonigle, he performed well in Double-A Erie. He hit .254 with a .919 OPS in 46 games. That happened in 2025. And the Tigers have already said he's going to make his MLB debut at some point in 2026. We all know that's happening. Personally, I think he's going to return to Double-A Erie or open in Triple-A Toledo. And then he's going to get called up for his MLB debut in mid-August because then the Tigers are able to preserve his rookie eligibility for 2027. I think that gives him the best chance to win Rookie of the Year. It also gives the Tigers the best chance to secure a top draft pick. And also, if he doesn't come up until mid-August, he gets a chance to really refine his skills in the minor leagues. And then he can really hit the ground running when it's time to help with either a playoff push or, as the Tigers are already kind of a lock at that point, getting ready for the postseason and can kind of get comfortable before, the real games start. And on top of that, just as much as Tigers aren't shutting the door, they're also not, announcing the door is open for him to make the team. This has all just been really interesting to me throughout the first week of spring training. And then you go to Sunday on the first day of full squad workouts, and you have Kevin McGonigle taking reps at shortstop with Javier Baez, and Cole Keith is at third base, Gleyber Torres and Zach McKinstry at second base, Spencer Torkelson is at first base. Those are the best big league infielders for the Tigers, plus McGonigle. Now, we wrote about that in Freak.com in our Sunday observations. And then, of course, AJ Hinch was asked Monday about McGonigle's placement in that group for infield drills. And here's what AJ said.
AJ, it's been hard not to notice McGonigle working with the big league infielders so far. Should we read anything into that and kind of what goes into how you group him and the other young guys?
It kind of goes back and forth. I mean, obviously with Kevin, we want him to get his feet settled. And so we've got to get the nerves and the and even the awe factor. He's a very balanced person. He's sort of uniquely qualified to be comfortable in his own shoes, but it's a little different taking ground balls, next to Javi and feeding Gleyber. And so I think what you can read into it is what I said at the beginning of camp, which I want to get him comfortable. How do we get him comfortable is rip the Band-Aid off and get him working with the players that he's aspiring to be in the group that he's aspiring to play with. He'll go back and forth. I don't know if it's that way today and every day, but that's the goal.
How high is his maturity and intellect level? Because it struck this guy's from the day he was drafted.
Yeah, very high baseball IQ and baseball timing and feel for the sport. I mean, we asked him to go play third. He goes and wins the AFL MVP. And a lot of that is determined around the offensive side of it, but it never took a step back because of the stress that we put on him by moving over to third base in the fall league, where he's one of the younger players in the league. So from a confidence level and feel for the game, he's always come across as being well advanced. His coaches in the minor leagues have always raved about the non-measurable attributes. We can measure all the other things. It's easy to see why we like him. Part of the reason that he's being pushed quickly through the minor leagues is because he's adept at all the little things.
Sure enough, on Monday, McGonigle was doing infield drills with the prospects and the young players. He wasn't with the other big leaguers. So it has been hard to get a read on this situation. We know the Tigers love McGonigle for his offense, and maybe they think they could help him immediately. I mean, would he be an upgrade over someone like Wenceel Perez on the roster? Historically, Perez has performed better as a left-handed hitter, which makes McGonigle a natural fit to take his roster spot as a left-handed hitter, especially if Matt Vierling is going to be healthy and taking outfield reps away from Wenceel Perez. I guess that's for the Tigers to sort out. But we also know the Tigers want McGonigle to improve defensively at shortstop and third base. Those are the positions he's going to focus on in spring training. He's not going to play second base. He is going to spend a lot of time at shortstop and third base because that's where he's going to play once he makes his MLB debut in 2026, whenever that is. So I'll go back to what I said earlier. The Tigers haven't announced the door is closed, but the Tigers also haven't announced the door is open. And now that we've touched on everything and you've heard from AJ Hinch, I'm going to ask you this question probably a million times this spring, so buckle up. What do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, no, I think that he's going to get plenty of reps in games. He's going to stick around. And I think somewhere in the middle of camp, he'll be one of the cuts, right? Like, and they'll come out and they'll say, he's shown us everything we wanted to see, but, we want him to play every day. And that might not happen here. So, we'll move on with this roster right now and we'll see him later in the year. They might not say that, but, they might hint at that because, I as much as we like to think about him coming north, and I thought, at points last year, like he was a lock, it just where this roster is right now, it doesn't make a ton of sense because, like I said, he's got to play every day. If you bring him up, you got to play him every day. And I just don't know if he's ready to be that everyday shortstop. And that's the key.
All right, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, we're joined by former Tigers catcher Alex Avila to discuss Justin Verlander's return to Detroit. Everyone, I'd like to welcome former Detroit Tigers catcher Alex Avila to the Days of Roar podcast for the second time and the first time since January 2024. Alex played for the Tigers from 2009 to 2015 and again in 2017 as part of a 13-year MLB career. It's now February 2026, and we are here to discuss his old teammate and close friend, Justin Verlander, returning to the Tigers on a 1-year, $13 million contract, along with a few other topics. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Evan, Chris, I appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to this summer in Detroit. Should be a great summer for Detroit Tigers fans.
Well, we have a lot to discuss, and there's no better place to start than with your initial reaction to the news. Like, where were you? What were you doing? And what did you think when you found out Justin Verlander is returning to the Tigers?
Well, it's funny that you asked, like, where was I? What was I doing? Because I was actually out of the country. I was in Nicaragua, and when I was just landing in Managua there, when the news broke and my phone just kind of started blowing up. And I was there because I'm on this kind of little side project, kind of passion project with a friend and neighbor of mine, Anthony Fasano, who was a tight end in the NFL for a long time. We're putting together our own cigar line. So we were down there in the tobacco fields and the tobacco factory, kind of putting together our cigar. And all of a sudden, like, this news breaks and my phone starts blowing up with requests for interviews and stuff like that. And at the same time, I'm up in the mountains of Nicaragua, kind of, getting kind of hard to reach. And I was actually a little surprised just because I had talked to Justin just a few days prior. And, just kind of catching up and trying to figure out when we were going to get dinner together again. And he was just kind of telling me, like, there wasn't, a whole lot to go off of as far as, like, his free agency so far, as far as which teams. Said there were, a few teams obviously, kind of keeping tabs and kicking the tires. And, from the last I'd spoken with him, there wasn't anything imminent. And, just a few days later, the deal gets done and I know he was extremely excited. I was very excited myself just to see it happen. I know it's something that, the two of us had talked about for a few years now, with him, wanting to at least try to have the opportunity to go back to Detroit at some point before his career is over. So I was very excited for him. I was excited for, myself, Tigers fans, to kind of be able to watch this unfold this year.
I want to dig into that from your perspective because we have heard from Justin what this means to him, but what does it mean to you? I mean, you're his friend, you're his teammate. You've caught him more than any other catcher in his career, and it's not even close. When this news happens, where's your heart at?
Well, my heart was with Justin, because I know this was something that he was, we, like I said, we had talked about on several occasions over the last few years, like, him wanting this opportunity to be able to go back there. For as much as, Detroit meant to him, the Tigers fans meant to him. I mean, the years we had together, those teams, during our time there, they were great Tigers teams at a time where, the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a Tigers fan during the time that we were there? And, the place was always rocking. I mean, it was 3 million fans every year. So I think just the thought of being able to have that opportunity for him to go back to really kind of say thank you again, and I think that was something that kind of weighed on him a little bit over the years. I know even when my dad traded him in 17 after, they started the rebuild and we were all getting traded. I know he really wrestled with the idea of maybe not allowing the trade because he, loved that organization so much, had, grown up in that city, so the fact that he's able to come back, I know he's extremely excited. I'm very excited for him and his family to be able to do that, because it's special for someone that's accomplished as much as he has in his career, to have that kind of status as a baseball player, but then also like the kind of status he has as a Detroit Tiger and what he means to a lot of Tigers fans that kind of grew up watching those teams, watching his prime as a Tiger. It's going to be an incredibly special season, I think, in Detroit, with fans, getting the chance to see, Justin every 5 days again in Comerica.
So you guys, you talk about this a bunch. Did you actually think it would happen? For a while there, it felt like the Tigers were not going to be competitive enough to make sense for him.
We weren't really sure. I know that was, he was hoping that it was going to happen, last season. I know that, that was, something he would have liked. And Buster and the Giants came calling and, that was a great opportunity for him as well, to go and pitch there, with a great organization like the Giants. And, so short answer to that, no. Yeah, I mean, didn't really know. Like, I know he wasn't, sure if he would ever get the opportunity again. I certainly wasn't, and I think just sometimes some things happen for a reason. I know, like, probably what, had a little bit to do with it was, Reese Olson going down, for the year. And, Reese is an extremely talented pitcher and a really, really good major league pitcher. He's going to have a really nice career. And it's unfortunate that, he ended up getting hurt. And, his replacement is a future Hall of Famer that, happens to be a franchise icon. So it's like, a situation, I think, for the Tigers and Justin that, it just was kind of meant to be, I think, going into the season. And, so, sometimes things happen, you feel bad that, Reese ended up getting hurt, but at the same time, I'm very happy for my friend that's going to have an opportunity to play in front of, Tigers fans again.
So, Justin's about to turn 43, and I'm looking, and you just turned 39. You're a sprightly young 39. What if Jake Rogers or, Dylan Digler, unfortunate incident, you come back, get the gang back together?
Well, the funny thing is, once he signed, the amount of texts that I got, like, are you coming out of retirement too? And, there's no chance of that happening. Dylan and Jake have got that position locked down and they've done a great job. I might be able to get through a game. I don't know. Maybe I'll come up to spring training and bring my gloves, see if Justin wants to play catch, but that'd be the extent of it right there.
That'd be incredible. So I want to ask about Justin's personality. At the press conference, he talked a lot about how he is a different man today than he was when he left the Tigers. And he talked about his daughter changing his perspective on things. He said he was kind of a horse with blinders on as a young pitcher, and now he's taken the blinders off and he's able to be more present. He also said that the mindset that he had before with the blinders on, it meant that maybe he wasn't always the best teammate, but now he's worked on his communication in the clubhouse. He wants to be more open and sharing information with players. I know that's a lot to throw at you, but what can you say about Justin as a person, both who he was back then and then who he has become today?
Yeah, no, I think that's the way he puts it is extremely accurate. My first interactions with Justin, my first few years with him, obviously we had a lot more communication back and forth because we were directly working together every 5 days and, seeing each other every single day. But the way he describes it as far as really Justin needed to, on a daily basis, have kind of those blinders on because he was trying to figure out, not only to be successful, as a starting pitcher in the big leagues, but also to try to get to the point where he's trying to aspire the kind of goals he had as far as winning a World Series, but also being, a Hall of Fame type pitcher. He always had those aspirations, those goals. And I think he, in his own head was trying to figure out how to make sure he was going to be able to, one, be successful for the team, but at the same time have the type of career that was going to kind of legitimize that and achieve those types of goals. And I've always said though, when, your main guys, your number one guys like that you want kind of leading a rotation, you want them to have a bit of an edge to them. You want them to be a little selfish, because that kind of mentality allows them to become, the horse that they are for you. Skubal's got a little bit of that. Scherzer had a little bit of that. All the number one pitchers that I've caught, always had a little bit of that type of edge to them to where I want that guy, I want his goal to be a Cy Young Award winner. I want him to that's what he wants out of himself every single year, because that in turn is always going to give that success and help the team and be beneficial for the team if he's able to do that. And I think early on in Justin's career, he needed to focus on himself quite a bit to try to figure out how to do that. And at the same time, too, there's also a lack of experience there, that he's also learning as he's going. And I think as he got older, as he was able to gain that experience, I think he realized, okay, I know now exactly what I need to do every year. So I maybe don't need to have as much, I don't need to put in as much time. I can now, kind of disperse my time throughout the team and to the guys that kind of are looking for that same understanding and experience and satisfaction that I needed when I was a young player. And, I've absolutely seen that growth through him, not only like when he was in Houston, even the last year we played together before he got traded to Houston, you could kind of see that change in him. And obviously becoming a dad gives you perspective that you'll never, ever experience unless you actually experience becoming a father. And, so all those things, come into play with, where he's at today. I think the other thing is him kind of realizing that, understanding it, and then, being able to kind of move forward, with all that is commendable on his part. And then also, and what other, guy that he's played with over the last few years, wouldn't want to have a guy like Justin be a sounding board off, because, he's literally experienced everything you can imagine on a baseball field. Even the low points for as great of a player he is, he had some really low points at times during his career, whether it was dealing with injuries, inconsistency, struggles, having to make adjustments. I mean, he's very, willing to discuss that over his last few years on how often he's had to adjust his mechanics over the course of a season to find that thing, kind of find that click that works to get him, back to pitching well. So that's something every player goes through. Now Justin's able to kind of, help guys along the way try to figure that out himself, because he now knows, how to do that. Not only, make those adjustments himself, but also help explain it. That's the other thing too. A lot of guys, may be able just to do it because they're just naturally gifted. Some guys have, are not able to, figure out how to make those adjustments and then also verbalize it to other guys that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's nothing more important than making adjustments in baseball. At least that's what you always think about with prospects and young players. But you touched on it a couple times here about the 2017 season. And that's, when Justin gets traded to Houston, you get traded to the Cubs. They trade JD Martinez. What was it like going through all that? And then also knowing that was your dad executing this kind of teardown?
Yeah, I mean, it's, it was tough because I think a lot of us that were, obviously on those teams for a long time and had so much success in Detroit, it was tough because, all of us that had been on those teams, like we all felt like a sense of regret not being able to kind of finish the job, with some of those great Tigers teams that we had. And I remember so many times, kind of early on in that run where the city was excited, the fans were excited, media was excited, like the type of questions I'd be getting on a daily basis, when with those teams, with the runs we were on, on how exciting it was to be in Detroit or a Tigers fan during that time, because we were a good team. We always had aspirations of it was World Series or bust. That was the expectation, but at the same time, I always tried to not so much caution people, but at least add some perspective that, stuff like this doesn't last forever. There's always these cycles to these types of teams and seasons and runs by teams where, yeah, we're good now. We're going to be good in the future, but at some point there's going to be some sort of change. It doesn't last forever. And, so I just wanted to make sure like people really appreciated what we were kind of doing at the time. But then once everything, it was kind of like the line drawn in the sand where, they're going to be going through a rebuild now and looking to shed some salary. So like, it was kind of like that, damn, like we weren't able to accomplish what we tried to accomplish, all those years, with some great Tigers teams. So that was a big regret for a lot of us that were on those teams. And so when that was starting to happen, one, it was sad because of that, but at the same time, as players, like we had to look towards the future a little bit. And, for myself, it was like, okay, well, I got traded to the Cubs. So like, they were, we ended up winning the division that year and losing to the Dodgers in the championship series. But, I had to look forward to that. Justin, same thing. I remember having conversations with him when, at the end of August, when he wasn't sure if he was going to get traded or wanted to get traded. And, I was having those conversations with him being like, look, Justin, they're kind of embarking on a rebuild. One of your goals is to be in the Hall of Fame. You need to win games, and, you might want to look into, maybe accepting a trade because it's going to put you on that track or at least continue on that track, where if you stayed in Detroit, yeah, you'd have that legacy of being in Detroit, but, it would have been significantly harder. And, so like we were always having those types of conversations towards, as that trade deadline, got a little bit closer, my dad was always kind of making sure like we were all updated on what was happening, and keeping everybody informed as far as the conversations that were going on. So, that was a tough time because it was like, at one point you were, those of us that had been there for a while, we were kind of upset, like it was kind of coming to an end. But at the same time, we had to look forward to the rest of our careers and to our futures and try to build those types of relationships that we had in Detroit with wherever it is we were going to be going after that.
So all those trades happened in 2017. Fast forward more than 8 years later, Justin Verlander back with the Tigers. And this team expects to contend for the World Series in 2026. We've talked about what Justin's return means for the Tigers off the field, behind the scenes, in the clubhouse. But what does it mean on the field? What type of performance do you think we should expect from Justin Verlander as he's about to turn 43 years old?
Well, I wouldn't put anything past him. I mean, last year he made, 29 starts through 150 innings at 42 years old, and he was still throwing. I remember there were a couple games that I would watch last year, and he was still hitting 97, 98 miles an hour. Now, he's not throwing that consistently, but he's consistently 94, 95 still. And, which is remarkable. It's incredible. And there were times last year, and some of the really good games that he pitched, or like if he, ended up passing, another all-time great on the strikeouts list or something, I'd text him or call him because it was incredible to watch, to see, someone with that kind of longevity still pitching that high of a level. I think, his second half, arguably you could have had him up there as, probably one of the top 8-10 pitchers in baseball during his last like 13, 14 starts, the way he was going. The first half was tough. He had some bad luck. He had the pec injury. So like, I think the first few months of last season kind of wore him down a little bit just because, it seemed like it was harder, which, I get. Like, I mean, he's 42 years old. He wasn't able to get a win until like midway through the season. So it's like you start thinking, right? But everything was there. It was like, well, just kind of get through this tough time. And then, things will start to turn around, and they did for him in the second half. And so I would expect him to pitch, more like that guy in the second half of last year. Is he going to make, 32 starts in the year? I mean, he made 29 last year. So like you would think, oh, maybe you'll get, 15 out of him or 120 innings. But, anyone that knows Justin, he expects himself to make every start, and to give the team as many innings as possible. And so I wouldn't put it past. You're going to see some flashes of the old Justin, depending on the start. You might see some struggles, but you also see someone that's going to work extremely hard to like turn around whatever a bad start comes across or like a bad stretch comes around in order to give his team a chance to win. But it'll be really fun to see, because I'm expecting like there's going to be some nights in Detroit where he's going to be going into the seventh, without giving up a run and maybe like 2 hits, and he's around 100 pitches, and that crowd's going to want him to finish that inning. And is AJ going to go out there and take out a future Hall of Famer, or let him finish the inning? Kind of drama. And those are the kind of things I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously had this incredible Hall of Fame career. There were some downs there. You've talked about him, but like, just remarkable thinking he goes down with Tommy John surgery and then comes back and wins the Cy Young at 39. Like, nobody does that, let alone a 39-year-old.
Nobody does that.
No. And so, you've seen him kind of adjust and change all these different times. I'm curious what you think, how he still succeeds. What does he do so well? What works?
Well, I mean, he's relentless in his work. So that's one thing. I mean, I think a lot of guys, especially with the type of success that he's had, it's easy to get complacent, where, you might think you're not getting complacent, right? You tell yourself, you're working hard. A lot of guys kind of go through that, where like you have a lot of success and you kind of continue to do the things you typically do, not knowing that, hey, if you're not taking, a step or two forward, you're not staying still. Like you're going backwards. Other guys are working just as hard, if not harder, not only to take your job or to beat you. So you're constantly trying to kind of one up yourself as far as your work ethic and different ways how you can improve. And Justin's relentless at that. And I think that's one reason why he's been able to pitch until, 43 years old and be very successful at it, is because he doesn't allow himself to take a day off when it comes to getting his body, physically ready, but also from the mental side when it comes to pitching. He is constantly trying to find a way that'll make him better or have an advantage against a hitter. And those types of things are what makes him, great and has given him the longevity. But, kind of specifically though, like, he's adjusted. I remember like when I caught him, it was, a lot of our game plans that we would have, were based off of feel and what we saw kind of in real time and what, we kind of had in our scouting reports. I remember times like before a Justin Verlander start, I would sit at whoever it is we were facing, whether it was, Cleveland or Kansas City, whoever it was, I would watch probably at least 2 hours worth of video of that lineup that, or at least a similar lineup like I figured we were going to be facing. I'd watch video of a similar type pitcher. So a guy that was throwing mid to upper 90s with some, a nasty 12-6 curveball, and a changeup. So I'd watch those, those types of games with other guys, and I'd take notes. Justin would do the same thing. Maybe not watch the same games, but watch, similar games against the lineups. He'd take notes, and then we'd, take it into the pitchers meeting. Todd Jones would have his own notes. Then we'd have the scouting reports, and literally it would just be cross-referencing. And we build our game plans from that. So it'd be like hours of work going into that. And a lot of times, we would make adjustments based off of what we were seeing in game. And back then, Justin was throwing a 4-seam fastball, a 2-seam fastball, a curveball, and a changeup. Rarely threw a slider. I would say 2011 was probably the year he started, messing around with the slider. Nowadays, when Justin's pitching, he's throwing primarily 4-seam fastballs. He's throwing the curveball, a lot less than he was before, and he's throwing the slider a lot more, and has pretty much kind of put the changeup in his back pocket, albeit, depending on the hitter. So like the way he pitches has changed because, he's been able to evolve depending on, the way his stuff is being, feeling at the moment, but also, extremely specific to the hitter, not so much the lineup, but to the hitter, and that allows him to kind of be very detailed in his approach. And I think all those things have allowed him to evolve and have this type of longevity.
As we shift into some other topics, I want to get your thoughts on the 2026 Tigers. And for the rotation, it's Tarik Skubal, Framber Valdez, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and Justin Verlander. If everyone's able to stay healthy, where do you think that rotation stacks up among the 30 teams? And even beyond that, like what are the odds to win the AL Central? And how about the odds to win the World Series? Are those possible for the Tigers here in 2026, considering what they had as a whole?
Oh, no doubt. I think, I think instantly, especially with, bringing Framber on board, Justin on board, the type of depth they have in the rotation, and pretty much a lot of the same team coming back, hoping, those guys, the young guys, continue to keep improving. You have a team that, we're not that far away from a World Series appearance last year. So, then on paper, they look better than they did last year. So right off the bat, I think in my eyes, they're favorites for the AL Central. Cleveland's going to be really tough like they always are. Same thing with Kansas City. I think Minnesota's going to sneak up on some people. I know that, they've traded away a lot of guys, but there's still a lot of talent on that team. And you still have Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez to go through for Minnesota. So like those guys can shut you down on any given day. So it's not going to be easy, but on paper, they're definitely the favorites. And when you look at the rotation though, I know a lot of stuff was, thrown out there once Framber and Justin were announced that, is this one of the best rotations in baseball? The Dodgers and the Blue Jays are going to have something to say about that, but, they certainly have the makings of a very good rotation to great rotation, just kind of depending on health and performance. If those guys are able to stay healthy and perform like they're capable of, they're going to be in the thick of it and absolutely to be World Series contenders. I think also too, you're hoping for continued development with some of those guys, in the field. You want, Riley and Spencer to continue to get better and refine their game. Javi to have another very good productive season. Colt Keith, Dingler as well. I mean, he had a great season last year. It's awesome watching him catch. So, you hope all those guys continue to kind of refine their games and to get better. Is there a chance of like some, injury and regression with some guys? Absolutely. Like that happens every single year with really good and great teams. It's just a matter of having having the depth to be able to help withstand those tough times over the course of 162 games. And that's part of the beauty about our season. It's 162 games. It's a grind. So like, when you're able to get through it and get through that roller coaster, it's that much more satisfying at the end.
You mentioned Dylan Dingler there. I was going to ask you a question about him. You're the last Tigers catcher to make the All-Star team. I'm curious if you think that Dingler has what it takes, what you saw from him. You think he could be the next Tigers backstop to reach the Midsummer Classic?
He absolutely does. I mean, I thought he could have snuck in there last year, with the way he was playing. He also did something I never did too. He won a Gold Glove. I came in second a few times. So he did something there, but I think for sure he'll be, an all-star, sooner rather than later. He has that type of ability. He's tremendous defensive catcher. I think, he really kind of showed a lot of people that he can, handle himself at the bat last year. He had, really, really professional at bats, really all season. And so I think, he's really kind of turned himself into a complete catcher, really, someone that can impact the game defensively and offensively, which is extremely rare. We just did top 10 catchers on MLB Network. And I mean, he was in my top 10 for sure. I know, some of the other lists didn't have him just because, it was kind of like a breakout year for him. And, you want to see that consistently year in and year out. But, from what I saw compared to the rest of the catchers in the league, his ability to do that, to kind of impact the game on both sides of the ball like that is extremely rare for a catcher for any team. And, he's great to watch. And I gotta mention that to him though, like, hey, I'm last catcher to make an all-star team. You got some work to do, kid.
Well, yeah, I want to transition a little bit into your playing days. I'll tell you, one time I was at a game in the stands, you were at bat, and the kid behind me said, I played against Alex Avila in high school. He was a switch hitter, and he hit home runs from both sides of the plate. But it looks like you spent just 1 year in Michigan and then went back down to Florida. Was that a baseball thing, or was that like, boy, it really sucks to move away from your friends when you're in 10th grade?
No, I mean, it was kind of like a little bit of everything. So yeah, I mean, when my dad started working there in Detroit, I was in high school. So, not the easiest transition for any high school kid. But at the same time, I went to De La Salle and Warren, and it was, one of the best years and a half I had in high school. It was all boys school, and, I had some great friends and had an amazing time playing baseball. The baseball is a little different though, obviously in Michigan, especially when you're playing in the Catholic League and, having to deal with, snow flurries at the beginning of the year and frigid temperatures for a South Florida kid. But, at times, we had to play, 3-2 baseball, 3 balls, you walk, 2 strikes, you strike out, which is an adjustment as well. But I loved my time in high school in Michigan and being a pilot. But I think going into my senior year, it was, playing baseball again with, my friends in Florida. The other thing too was kind of like, actually, at least the way I talked about it with my parents was, my dad, in spring training would be in Lakeland for the entirety of spring training. A lot of times he would go down to Lakeland, end of January, beginning of February, and he's there till the season starts, which was, largely when the baseball season was for high school. So, we talked about it where I would kind of go to school, in the fall in Michigan, while, he was in Michigan every single day, going to the stadium, going to the office. And then, after the holidays, I'd do it the second half of the year in Florida and play baseball in Florida, just a 3-hour drive from where he was in Lakeland. So, because of that, we did get to see each other a little bit more over the course of those months. But then obviously that was short lived because it was just that 1 year, that senior year. Then I ended up going to Alabama and playing college baseball there. So, but I loved my time in Michigan playing high school baseball out there. Had some great friends, developed great friends. I actually joked with Steve Phillips all the time at MLB Network because he was a De La Salle pilot. He always likes to remind me though that his jersey and his number's retired there, mine isn't. So, which is warranted.
There's always somebody trying to run up you. I do, as a player, I remember you just wearing out shallow right field with line drives. And then basically that's where the exaggerated shift started taking place, just right there. How many hits do you think you lost to that? And how would you do in a day when the shift was banned?
Oh man. Well, my wife and father-in-law would say I need to go back. Like once they banned the shift, she's like, "Oh, why don't you come out of retirement?" I mean, it definitely would have helped a little bit when it came to the batting average. I think there was one year when teams really started shifting me. I want to say it was probably might have been like 2013 when teams started to really kind of shift me a little bit more. Mike Smith, who was in the front office of the Tigers, for a long time, Adam Dombrowski, and my dad, I remember him telling me kind of giving me like what my batting average would be if there was no shift. I was like, I don't want to hear this, because it's, it was a difference of 30 or 40 points or something like that. So, it was never as easy as people think of you could beat the shift by just, hitting the ball the other way. And, a lot of times that was my, strength during my career is hitting the ball to the opposite field, especially my power was kind of left center. But, a lot of times too, that was based off reaction, and the type of pitch, and what the pitcher is trying to do to you. Not so much, a lot of times when you try to force something like that, it doesn't always work out the way you expect it to. It's like a guy trying to hit a home run. It was more than likely not going to hit a home run. It's when he's not trying to hit a home run is when he's going to react and hit one. So, and then just the sheer physics of baseball, it's round bat, round ball. And when you're out in front, hey, you're going to pull the ball. So, that was tough. It would have been nice if maybe they would have made the rule change a little bit sooner, but I'm glad for left-handed hitters nowadays. They don't have to deal with that.
Behind the plate, obviously, you caught Justin Verlander's no-hitter in 2011, but you guys flirted with so many others along the way. As a catcher, how aware were you when you were catching a potential no-hitter, and what was that like?
Very aware. Very, very aware. I mean, that year in 2011, after he threw the no-hitter in Toronto, which was, I think, early May, like right before Mother's Day, I believe. And something had clicked from that year. Justin was struggling a bit leading up to that. He's always been a slow starter, when it comes to the seasons he puts together. And, really that game kind of something clicked for him, especially with his slider that he was, we were trying to incorporate a little bit more. And he just had everything lined up as far as his mechanics, release point. So the confidence started to go through the roof each and every game kind of after that. And I got to go back and actually see how many near no hitters it was on a stretch run after that no hitter over the course of the next 3 months, because it seemed like, on every 5 days he was, between the innings of, the fifth and the ninth inning, he was going into, the latter half of the game without giving up any hits. And there were a few games, one in particular, I remember a game in Detroit against the Pirates in the ninth inning that we could have had, but it was broken up. Yeah. With, Josh Harrison, broken bat base hit up the middle on a slider. It was a good slider. And actually years later, I played with Harrison my last year in Washington, and we talked about that. But I mean, Justin was on an incredible run that season, and every game that there was a potential for no-hitter, I absolutely was aware. And there were times knowing that Justin had the ability to throw 120, 130 pitches, I would call the game, kind of accordingly. And, Justin would pitch accordingly too. And there were always moments within the lineup that we were facing that I think we always kind of had in the back of our head where we could get a quick out. And where we might have needed to kind of grind the at bat out a little bit to try to get the strikeout, so we always kind of played that pitch count game accordingly. Once, we got to the latter half of the game and those 7th, 8th, 9th innings, 'cause I remember numerous occasions we'd be in the 8th inning or even the 9th inning, and he'd have around 100 pitches or, 98 pitches. And going into that inning, we knew, okay, where we can get those quick outs to kind of save those bullets to where when he needed to kind of empty the tank and get a strikeout or grind out an at bat against, a tougher hitter or a run producer type hitter, we always had that, left in the tank. And I would call games accordingly to that. And we would kind of game plan going into those innings with that in mind. Hey, I've got, X amount of pitches left. Let's try to get this guy out within 1 or 2 pitches. Maybe, call a 2-seamer here to try to get an early ground out, as opposed to starting off with a breaking ball and more going for swing and misses and strikeouts. So, those types of things were always in the back of my head when it came to catching Justin, and putting together game plans.
All right, before we get you out of here, we do want to touch on your post-playing career. You've been doing a lot of great work with MLB Network. I feel like we see you there more and more every season. How do you like doing the studio shows? And then I know you have 2 daughters. I know family time is sacred to you, but as they get older, do you have any desire to work for a baseball team, whether it's managing, coaching, scouting, player development, even maybe in an executive role like your dad?
Well, I mean, I do love what I'm doing now. You know, I never expected myself to do like TV work. I think everyone always kind of had pegged me as a coach, manager, doing something like that in baseball. I always wanted to, you know, stay in and around the game because I love it too much. But I think at the end of my career, when this opportunity presented itself, it was like, well, you know, I might be able to, you know, do this and spend a little more time at home. The other thing too is, to me, it seemed like a new challenge, you know, something kind of way out of my comfort zone, and that excited me as well. So I think that with the opportunity to be home a little bit more was one of the reasons why I kind of jumped into it. I've loved, you know, what I've been doing with MLB Network, and, you know, the people are great over there. I love working with a lot of those producers and other broadcasters. And it's been a great learning experience. Now, that being said, like, you know, in the back of my head, I absolutely, you know, can see myself in the future, like, you know, working with the team in some capacity like that. You know, I still get the itch to like put a uniform on and be on the field. And something I enjoyed like the last few years of my career is, you know, working with younger catchers. You know, so I'm never going to say never there, but I do love what I'm doing now, and I'm having a good time doing it. So, you know, if something like that happens in the future, and that would be, you know, I know that I have to, you know, kind of seek that out as well. You know, that's something like you can't really kind of wait around and wait for somebody to call. So, but now I'm just kind of really enjoying my time with my family, and, you know, getting to mix in some broadcasting and getting to talk baseball and watch baseball on a daily basis.
Alex Avila, that is all we have for you. We covered so many different topics, including the big topic of Justin Verlander returning to the Tigers for the 2026 season. Thank you for joining the Days of Our podcast. Hopefully we can get you back on again at some point in the future.
Absolutely, Evan. Chris, appreciate you having me anytime.
Everyone, that was Alex Avila, former catcher for the Detroit Tigers, who played more than 1,000 games across 13 MLB seasons. We're going to take a break, but when we return, we have more to discuss about the Tigers in spring training. We're back, everyone. Thanks again to Alex Avila for joining us to talk about Justin Verlander. Always a joy to have Alex on the show. Always a joy to spend time around him as well. Let's get into some other news and notes from this past week. The Tigers signed 2 players to minor league contracts in the days leading up to spring training. Left-handed reliever Connor Pilkington and outfielder Austin Slater. Do you have thoughts on those guys, especially Slater, because he is one of the few position players the Tigers signed to a minor league deal this offseason, and he's someone you mentioned on this show before?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are the sort of late offseason signings that are fun because they are interesting players who were kind of really on the cusp of getting big league deals, right? And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And so, but yeah, these are big leaguers with talent. Slater is probably a little bit past his prime athletically. I think he's 33 now, but he was a part of some solid Giants teams, and he fills an organizational need. Even, you know, I don't expect him to win a job out of spring training, but he's an outfielder for one, and they're kind of shallow in outfielders, especially at the upper minors. A lot of guys have left, you know, Akil Baddoo and so forth. So he helps out there, and he's got a history of hitting left-handed pitching pretty well. So it's kind of a little bit of an insurance if Jahmai Jones falls on his face here. So I like that as a minor league deal. And Pilkington's fun too. I remember him when he was a draft prospect. It was the same draft as Casey Mize and Tarik Skubal. I didn't know Tarik Skubal at the time, but I knew Pilkington. And, you know, he's turned into a reliever with a decent fastball, mid-90s fastball, and some good secondary stuff. He's kind of vaguely reminiscent of Bailey Horn as a lefty with a good arm who just hasn't thrown a ton of strikes. And there are dozens of those guys every year. And every now and then one of them pops. They figure out how to throw strikes, and then you've got a real weapon out of your bullpen. So that's it's a low risk, moderate reward signing for the end of offseason. So I like both of those.
Austin Slater, by the way, has opt-out clauses for March 21st, May 1st, and June 1st, which means he can force the Tigers to promote him or release him. Those are dates to know there for Austin Slater. One piece of injury news, catcher Dylan Dingler underwent a minor surgery in late January, but he isn't expected to miss any regular season games. He should be all good for opening day. Specifically, it was an arthroscopic surgery to clean up his right elbow. He's behind schedule. He's working through a throwing program. He needs to be able to throw from all angles. He's just not there yet, but he's catching bullpens. He's hitting all that good stuff. He's just behind schedule from a throwing standpoint, but he's not going to miss any games. And then I want to get into the spring training games. Those are starting soon. We mentioned the first Grapefruit League game is Saturday against the Yankees in Tampa. Is there anything in particular that you're watching for? Because for me, I'm looking at the starting pitchers as we get into camp. We'll see how the position players shake out and who gets more playing time early. Like all that kind of stuff is always up in the air and it's too difficult to predict. But from a starting pitching standpoint, like if you've watched how the Tigers have used their pitchers in bullpens and live batting practices, it's very clear there are 10 starters here. Tarik Skubal, Framber Valdez, Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, Justin Verlander, Keider Montero, Troy Melton, Ty Madden, Drew Anderson, and Emmanuel De Jesus. So we are going to see those 10 pitchers as starters throughout most of spring training. We are waiting to see who gets hurt from the big five because it seems like somebody always gets hurt. But beyond that, I'm curious to see who steps up from that other group. And that other group being Keider Montero, Troy Melton, Ty Madden, Drew Anderson, and Emmanuel De Jesus. Like some of those guys are going to be taking the long road trips to face the A team from other squads in spring training games. Probably going to be Keider Montero, probably going to be Troy Melton facing those A teams on the road. I'm really looking forward to seeing who emerges as the true 6th and 7th starters, because as we know, it's going to take more than 5 starters to carry the Tigers through the season. So starting pitchers, that is what I'm looking for as these Grapefruit League games get underway.
Yeah, it's funny. It wasn't that long ago when I was kind of looking at Troy Melton as a potential like number 3 starter on the team, at least in terms of talent and production.
We've come a long way, haven't we?
No, and he's still certainly talented and he will probably play a big role at some point down the road. But I think I touched on this a little bit, but I'm always, just getting baseball back, I'm always looking for, keeping my eye out for new pitches or improved pitches, seeing things like that. And, changes in batting stances. Has anybody made any, like you talk about, like Riley Green's very imperceptible changes, but sometimes guys make bigger changes and I like to look for those. And the one thing I'm really eager to see with all these young guys in camp is, one of the things that kind of they all share in common. And I'm talking Clark, McGonigle, Briseño, Lorenzo, Howie Lee, Trey Cruz, Eduardo Valencia. They all have pretty good approaches at the plate. They take a lot of pitches. They'll work walks. They don't get out of their game plan. And I'm curious to see if that holds in spring camp or if they start pressing. Cause I could see when you get close, you feel like you're getting close to the big leagues. I can see how you really want to go out there and make a star out of yourself. And that's just not these guys' games. I mean, they can hit, right? But it's also part of their game is being patient and letting the game come to them. And I just want to see if they can still do that in spring or if they start getting outside of themselves.
All right, it's time for us to get out of here. Thanks to Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for co-hosting with me this week. And thanks to everyone out there for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Give us a rating and comment what you think about the show. Stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.